Actually a very, very recent and very good systematic review around the evidence for mealtime strategies for increasing food and fluid in people with dementia. I just want to note that there if you want to copy down the author, or please email me and I will send you the reference. Interestingly, the systematic review from memory found and critiqued about so either 43 or 46 studies, and none of those from the view of research design were deemed good evidence. So I went, oh, well, I can't present on anything that's good evidence behind it for increasing food and fluid in people with dementia. However, what is particularly helpful about it is that it actually lists promising interventions and gives the references around those. So although they're saying the level of evidence isn't strong enough here to promote it, this is showing promise. And in all honesty, I must say my clinical practice and that I've observed in my colleagues, that list of promising interventions really covers a lot of the strategies that I use and I've seen my colleagues use. So probably a good one to look at if you're interested. All right, so my case study is a bit different to Vicky's in that I was working in a community setting and I received a referral for an older man with Down syndrome who is living in a supported accommodation setting. Now the context is really important here because very, very little background information was available. He was thought to be approximately 64 years old. And I crack up when I say that because normally do you have to think that someone's 64 years old? And unfortunately what had happened in this man's lifetime, which is a real blight I think on our service system, his family had relinquished care of him at birth and he had lived in multiple accommodation settings across his lifetime, and with each move more and more documentation was lost and information about his life was lost. And I have to say, unfortunately, it's not the first time I've met someone where people don't actually know their date of birth. So people he'd recently moved into the western area of New South Wales to be closer to family that had been located. And interestingly, he had family, a lot of siblings who had dementia. So I thought that was just quite interesting. But because he'd moved into a new accommodation, I keep forgetting it's right here in front of me. So I keep turning my head. I'm like, look here, Kate. It's the end of the day. So in this recently new accommodation setting, he actually received a whole range of health assessments that he hadn't had previously. And they identified that he had a severe visual impairment, pretty significant thing to identify. And at that point, he was also diagnosed with dementia. It wasn't specified in the documentation I saw what type of dementia it was. That organisation had just received some training from ADIC about the nutrition and swallowing risk checklist. And what happened in this context was that the organisation completed the checklist on all of their people that they supported across all parts of their organisation, accommodation, day program, respite, and then referred an enormous amount of people to ADIC for assessment of mealtimes. So this man was seen in the context of a group of speech pathologists travelling to the town in which he lived, in which we basically bunkered in to his services for a week, and we were seeing a whole range of people across that week. But his service request was one that I was allocated. So let's have a look. Really interestingly, as we often see with dementia, at the time of referral, the nutrition and swallowing risk checklists were that he was overweight, he was on multiple medications, had dental problems, that he would hide food or steal other people's food, he had difficulties with his bowels, and he took a long time to eat. 3 months later, when I met him, it was reported that he'd had recent and rapid weight loss, that he was just not eating at all. But his carers were actually really pleased with his behaviour because he was a lot more passive. Little in joke there, isn't there, for speeches. Okay, so usually when I try to do a swallowing assessment, I need to watch people swallow. And in this scenario, this man really was not recognising food or what to do with food. So in order to try and be able to assess him and observe him eat and drink, I was very fortunate in the service delivery model at the time that I was around for the 5 days of that week. So it allowed me to implement a range of strategies to try. So I kind of felt like I went into spy mode or stealth mode, and I was like literally spying on this guy at every circumstance I could. And what we tried was offering highly preferred foods and fluids, including him in the food preparation, having foods and fluids available all day. So we tried to tie in the fact of the previous behaviour of stealing food. We thought if things were available outside of mealtimes, he might pick them up, start eating. We had him sit with others at mealtimes. We tried having him sit with peers. We had tried him sit with staff. We tried him sitting one-on-one with people. I also was aware that potentially just my presence in the environment was changing his environment and his understanding of that. So I tried, just take him. I actually was I felt like I was stealth. I actually took myself out of the building and was looking through a window like a crack in the curtain going, please, just, have a go at something. And I was also getting crucially alarmed and very, very concerned. I was thinking, this just can't keep going on. He will have to go to hospital tomorrow if this continues. So, I was very keen to go back to Rochelle's theme to make a difference and have some kind of outcome for the service. But guess what? Not because I'm a good speech pathologist, just because very accidentally we discovered a strategy that worked for him. So what happened was, after spending many days with me, I had run out of conversation with a non-verbal person who I didn't know very well. And at the same time, in moving him into the facility, staff had identified an old photo album that came with him. So I went, oh, thank you, yes, excellent. Grabbed that, sat with him, just purely as an interaction, started looking and talking about the photos. And I noticed that he kept visually attending back to a photo that appeared to be someone's birthday party. And it was a really old, damaged photo. And when I looked at it really closely, I thought, I think that's you when you were younger. It was hard to know, but I think it was. And if it was him, he was sitting there with a birthday hat on, with a birthday cake, all the candles, and lots of people around him. And while he was looking at that, I just started talking about, oh, and there's your birthday cake, and everyone was singing happy birthday, and I bet you guys cut that cake up and ate it afterwards. And I was eating my lunch, and he just, without even looking, reached out and grabbed my sandwich and started eating. And I just said, oh my gosh, that cake must have been delicious. Was it chocolate? Oh, what else can I talk about with birthday parties? So it was pure luck. I think it was probably a culmination of trying to think as laterally as possible, and again, pure luck. Okay, so we found something that initiated a meal. While we had that opportunity, I was like, quick, get me everything you've got in the kitchen. Bring it, so that I could do a mealtime assessment. And what that identified was that he had an oral dysphagia that was characterised by reduced chewing, forgetting, as Prue mentioned before, just clean seeming to forget about food that was in his mouth. So I wouldn't even describe it as holding food in his mouth. It was, if he put food in, chewed it a couple of times and swallowed it, great. But if after that first 2 or 3 chews it didn't get swallowed, he just seemed to clean forget that it was there in his mouth. He definitely showed a preference for finger foods, and actually, when presented with a food with a spoon, went back to that same blank look of not seeming to recognise it as food. There was reduced holding of food in his mouth when there was stronger sensory information added to the food. And that in particular for him was spicy flavours, which I have tried often, but I'm definitely finding Prue's research around the 11 times stronger flavours. But also for him, very importantly, temperatures. So when it came to thin fluids, he actually managed thin fluids quite well if it was super cold or really quite hot, but not if it was anything in between. Okay, so from there, I worked with the staff around a plan or an intervention of which the priority was referral to dietitian. I recognised he was going to need soft finger foods with strong flavour additions. He certainly needed some mealtime partner strategies, and he was safe on thin fluids, obviously with supervision if they were hot or very cold. However, none of that mattered if he wasn't actually going to initiate eating and drinking. So the mealtime initiation strategies that we put in place were that he was involved in food preparation with a really strong emphasis on smelling, especially given his vision impairment, that he ate with staff, and I've put role modelling there, but in all honesty, it was so they could keep talking about the birthday party if that was what was required. Because they were involving him in food prep, I thought we might find another occasion that he finds enjoyable that's meaningful for him. So I asked staff just to take photos whenever he was around food and seemed to be enjoying himself, so they could become future visual cues. And most prevalently and most needed was that he actually needed to look at that old birthday party photo and have staff sing happy birthday to him prior to each time he was presented with food. And staff actually reported that, you know, they barely had to articulate the words. They could almost just hum the tune, but they were obviously linking to his strongest memories and, you know, became a very important cue for him to eat. So, you know, my input with him was very short term, and the plan was always that on turning 65 he was going to move into an aged care facility, and that is what I heard happened. And I just laughed my head off because I'm like, but was he 62 or was he 72? You know, we don't really know. But as a short-term interim strategy, they were able to maintain his health, his well-being, nutrition and hydration until he went into that aged care facility. So on that happy note, that's kind of where we finish with the case studies. Oh, sorry. No, it's not. Geez, I'm struggling. Last end of the day. In summary, take-home messages from Vicky and I. Always, I'm on the wrong page. Always consider the possibility of dementia, especially if you're working with adults who have Down syndrome from their late 30s. Always try to collect information about previous skills, because it's very hard to determine regression or change in skills if we don't know what has happened, what the person's abilities were previously. Always raise or flag any concerns you have about the possibility of dementia with the person's medical practitioner, and think creatively. You know, I think that came through really strongly from Prue's presentation as well. I've just put 2, and I'm more than happy again to email these to people, 2 internet links there. If you're interested in learning more, if that's what's going to go on your action plan, nod, nod, wink, wink, elbow, elbow, That first link that I've got there is a really excellent resource that was produced by the Centre for Developmental Disability and Health in Victoria in collaboration with Down Syndrome, the Down Syndrome Australia Network and Alzheimer's Australia, and it's specifically about Down syndrome and Alzheimer's disease. And also the Centre for Developmental Disability Health in Victoria have created some online training modules that are targeting disability support workers and carers in aged care facilities about Down syndrome and Alzheimer's. So probably two great resources to think about for further info. And that really is it. So thank you, everyone.